So hi again for our Q&A session for KMM Plus Insider Community. Today we're going to have a look through the questions that we have prepared so far and also have an open discussion. And right now I'd like to present to you Anna Radzikowska. Anya is a professional Kanban trainer, coach, and also a product manager of Kanban maturity model. Today she will be with you, and together you will explore more about Kanban method and Kanban maturity model, and as well have some live discussion. So the word to Anya.
Thank you very much, Diana. Welcome, everyone. It's very nice to meet you. As I mentioned just a moment ago, very nice to see some of you again. So we met in different circumstances in the classes, in live meetings, which happened recently. So I'm very, very glad to see you again. And as Diana mentioned, we'll get started with the questions that you had a chance to share with us. So the ones that you wanted us to answer, or the ones that are the most commonly repeated questions that we are being asked over in the class or over emails. And so it will take us probably around 25 to 30 minutes. We have 6 questions prepared for you. And then you will have a chance to ask your own questions, or maybe if you are interested in any of these topics in more details or in more depth, then we can discuss about it. So let me start with sharing my screen. I hope that you can see it well. And so let's get started with the first one. So when is the Kanban method appropriate to use? So that was the question that I modified a bit because it was a bit more specific. So whether Kanban method is appropriate only for the teams or also for the bigger organizations. And we already know that the Kanban method is not for the teams only. Kanban method can be applied everywhere, starting from the very personal level through the teams, projects, products, services, the whole departments and the whole organization. So this is a very short answer to this question, but I think that it's worth to take a look at the situation where Kanban method is appropriate or may not be appropriate to use. And for that, we ask 4 appropriateness questions. So the first one is, does your process suffer from overburdening or variability in flow? So if we have a situation that there is a huge disbalance between demand and capacity, if we see that people are overburdened, they are sitting overtime, you are constantly crunching, and you just don't even recognize your family, it means that probably you have a problem with the balance of demand coming to your process and your capacity to deliver. So if you find yourself in such a situation and you answer yes to this question, it means that Kanban method is for you. So answer yes to this question means yes, Kanban is for me. The second one, would you benefit from deferred commitment? So this is a situation that, let's imagine we have a process. At the beginning of the process, we have pool of ideas or backlog with items in this backlog. And then everything that is in the backlog is committed. So whatever appears in a backlog is committed, and actually you have no choice, you have to deliver everything. So this is the situation when we give ourselves no choice, when even the things that are very uncertain and we don't really know whether this is something that we should do, whether this is something that brings the value to our client, we should really deliver. But we commit to everything upfront. So if we find ourselves in the situation that we would really benefit from deferred commitment, so we are not committing to everything at the beginning, but we are rather having discussion, we are gathering some information before commitment, then again, if so, Kanban method is for me. Are people likely to resist change emotionally? So probably you already know that the Kanban method applies evolutionary change management, and it applies this evolutionary approach to change. So we basically start with what we do now. We respect current roles, we respect current processes, we don't introduce any huge transformations. And if we see that in our organization, any change, even the very small one, meets with resistance, it means that Kanban method, again, is for me because Kanban method helps us to take the organization through change in this evolutionary manner. So if we answer yes to this question, then Kanban method is for you. And the fourth one, is your boss revolutionary? So if we have a boss, if we have manager, director, who really wants to see immediate changes, who wants to install transformation projects in our organization, who wants to reinstall processes, or who wants to do restructurization, the huge changes in organization, then if we answer yes to this question, Kanban method is not for us, because then we'll probably have a huge clash of opinions and approaches to how we change. So if we answer yes to 3 questions and no to the 4th question, it means that the Kanban method is appropriate to use in our organization. Question number 2. How can we use Kanban to know when we would deliver features in the long term? So again, this question sounds to me like coming from one of the myths that are very common in our Kanban world, that Kanban, first of all, is for the teams only, but second of all, is for the maintenance team specifically, for the teams who are responsible for client support. Again, we know that this is not true. We know that the Kanban method can be applied to every place where we are talking about the knowledge work. And hence there is no strict size of the item that could be visualized and present in our processes and in our Kanban systems. So if we have this big item, the usual problem is with planning. So in most of the cases, we know how to plan this small work, small item that takes us like 1-2 days to deliver, or some smaller user stories. But sometimes we face the huge features, we face the huge work items, or even the products where our client or our end user is actually interested in the whole product, the whole feature, because the components of this feature don't bring any value to him or her. And hence, customer wants to know when I will get the end product in my hands. So to do this, to do the proper planning for small but also the big items, we have a couple of questions that we can ask preparing for planning. And this is the set of the questions that for which the answers we need to know. So the first question is, what is your lead time? So we need to know what is our time to market. How long does it take for us to process the item from the moment when it appears to the moment when it's delivered, which is our customer lead time, or from the moment when item is committed to the moment when it's delivered, which is our system lead time. But anyway, we need to know our lead time. Then the second information is we need to know when is now. So in our case, now is 30th of June, 2022. But if you think about a starting point of your product, this now moment can also be further in the future. Then you need to know what is delivery date and what is due date. So when you are expected to deliver this particular product or service. And then you compare now versus delivery date. So if we say that delivery date is the end of the year, then now 30th of June versus the end of the year is 6 months. And finally, what is the customer expectation? So whether this, if we stick to this 30th of December, whether this 30th of December is the date which is the fixed date and we cannot negotiate this date, we need to deliver at this date, or whether this date is negotiable. So actually, if the result, the work will be delivered after 30th of December, or 31st of December, it's still fine. There's no problem. And we can negotiate delivery date, because these are two different situations, if the delivery date is negotiable or not. And now, having this set of information, we are able to compare our lead time and now versus desired delivery date. So if we see that our lead time is 6 months and our desired delivery date versus now is 6 months, it means that probably we should start already. And why it's useful method and approach and questions to ask, because then it doesn't really matter whether you are talking about delivering small item like solving the bug, or you are talking about delivering big item, which is feature or even the whole product. You can ask the same questions. They are not related to the size of the item. They are related to the time which is required to deliver this work. Question number 3 is, can tickets move backwards on the board? And this is the question that I keep hearing from the first time that I heard about Kanban. So I heard that there is a Kanban method, there are boards, visualization, that we are limiting work in progress. And then when we started to visualize the question, but can we move these tickets backwards on the board? Answer is yes, you can, but there is a lot of buts here. So first of all, you may face a situation that you are breaking work in progress limits. So you have, say, very basic process, backlog to do, analysis, development, testing done. And your item is in development, and you realize that actually there is some additional analysis required on this item. And you would like to then move this item back to analysis and ask your analysts to do some work, some additional work on that. And you realize that in the analysis column, the limit is free and there are free items. So if you decide to move item back to analysis board, to analysis column, it means that you are breaking work in progress limit. And basically you would need to create a separate policy for such a situation. So this is one of the situations and one of the problems with this approach. The second one is that you may mess up the metrics. So first of all, you will see some fluctuations in your cumulative flow diagram. So you may see that your cumulative flow diagram is going down, which means that this is one of the symptoms that the item was moved back on the board. And the other problem may be with the lead time, because if you keep moving items back and forth, you don't really know for how long items stayed in the particular phase of the process, if it's important to you, if you calculate it. So making sure that the metrics are clear and kept on track may be difficult in such a situation. You may ruin your flow. So you are moving items back and forth. Items are jumping between different phases of the process. And at some point in time, you may not even remember whether this item was already tested or not, whether it was in development or it's still in analysis. So if you have like 3-5 items in the process, probably it's not a problem. But now let's ask ourselves how many items we have in process, how many items we have in progress, or our clients. Is it really a couple of them, up to 10? Or maybe the situations that I keep seeing, so there is 30, 50, 70 items on the board. Then you don't know what's going on with them. And finally, remember the knowledge discovery journey. So we very often say that moving items through the process and moving the tickets on the board is the knowledge discovery process. We are learning more and more with every step. So it may sound a bit philosophical, but if you move item back, say from this development to analysis, it may mean that everything that we have learned in development now have been unlearned. And I really hope that we don't unlearn what we've already perceived and what we've already done. That's why this yes is very weak yes. Normally we don't recommend moving items backwards on the board because of these problems that it may create. But you may also face the situation that saying to people, saying to your teams or your clients that you cannot move item backward on the board will face very huge resistance. So then it's much easier to allow them to move items backwards and then help people to deal with the consequences rather than just pushing against resistance. Question number 4, what are the most important Kanban metrics to track? And we've already written a lot of articles as Movisoft. In the KMM, you can read a lot about the lead time. We also did a couple of webinars and presentations about the lead time. So of course, lead time. Lead time for me is in the search for predictability. And this is the metric which is at the beginning of all improvements, which will really help you to understand what's going on in your process, why your clients like you, or maybe they don't like you so much, and how you can improve your process to be more predictable. But because we've already done so much, we've shared so much information about the lead time, I would like to talk about the other metrics today, especially one So the other metric that I usually recommend to the teams, especially those teams who are working in very strict time boxes like sprints, except for the lead time, they also need information about delivery rate. So how many items will finish over the period of time. But the metric that I would like to focus more on today is the flow efficiency. So let's take a closer look at this one. And to talk about flow efficiency, I've prepared some set of data from one of the clients I worked with recently. So first, what you see on this picture, and the first, what is the flow efficiency for those of you who don't know? So the flow efficiency is the ratio of the actual work versus the total lead time, and then multiplied by 100%. So then you have your flow efficiency somewhere between 0 and 100%, where 100% would really mean that you are doing nothing else but just working, which is basically not possible. Flow efficiency is not that high. And let's look at this particular example of very, very basic process. And it was a support team. So the perfect place for the Kanban. So in this team, we faced the situation that their lead time was very long and the variability was very huge. So the lead time for the time period that we analyzed, was 1 year, was between 1 and 400 days. So the outliers were somewhere in 400 days tail on the lead time, which for the support team, which normally delivers most of the items in 1 to up to 5 days, this 400 days was very, very, very long. So we implemented some initial improvements to deal with these outliers and to make the process more predictable. And then we started also to look at some additional metrics. So what you can see here is the breakdown of this lead time. And when we look at the period of 3 months, this is between 11th of January and 11th of April this year, and you will look at this pie chart, what you can see here is that the items are in progress for around 29% of the time. Then they are waiting for information 55% of the time, and they are stopped for around 15-16% of the time. So the process was very basic. When item was picked up from the queue, the status of this item was in progress. Then if there was an impediment, people from the support team were looking for additional information. They sent information to the user. Hey, could you please provide me with some more details? And then this item was moved to waiting for information status. If it waited for too long, it was automatically moved to the stopped status. But what this information tells us, that out of this whole delivery time that they had over these 3 months, the actual work took only 29-30% of the time, which means that for another 70% of the time, they have been waiting for information, which was a problem for this team in the first place. But also if we switch the perception and if we think about ourselves as customers of this team, what does it say? It says that if I send the ticket to this team, from the moment that it's being started to the moment when it was delivered to me, the solution was delivered to me, it might have took like 10 days. And out of these 10 days, only 3 days item was actually in progress. The other 7 days, it was waiting for me to answer, to provide some additional information. So from my perspective, if I was more responsive, if I was more collaborative towards this team, then I could get my solution much earlier. So for this team, what it helped them to realize is that they shouldn't necessarily focus in the first place on how fast they go, how fast they are, moving their fingers on the keyboard. What they should focus on is collaboration and education of their clients, that actually most of the lead time to market is spent by this team on waiting and not working. And this is the power of flow efficiency and the power of visualization of the flow efficiency. And I totally understand and I realize that this flow efficiency here, this in progress, may not be even 30%. It might be even lower if there is a situation that we don't track this information very precisely. But even if we look at it at this very basic level, we can see that the flow efficiency is already like 30%, which is basically pretty good result if we think about it. Now, going to the question number 5, I think, can we apply the Kanban alongside the other methods? The answer to this question is very simple. Yes, you can. So basically you start with what you do now. So really, no matter what you do, whether you have Scrum, Waterfall, Explain, Nexus, or whatever else you may also use your homemade methods. You can apply Kanban to all these methods because you don't need to change anything immediately in your organization. You start where you are today and you just keep improving using the Kanban approach. But there are also a couple of known integrations which have been described in the KMM, and these are the integrations that you can find. So the current described integrations. This is integration with CMMI, so capability maturity model integration, integration of KMM with Lean and Toyota production systems, with accepted value costing, Deming's points for management and Bezos points for leadership. So these are leadership integrations. And there is also a couple of more smaller integrations. All of them you can find in the KMM or in the KMM Plus. So you can read more how to integrate this stuff if you are in this place using these methods or frameworks. And the question number 6, should you always consider the size of the team while establishing the work in progress limit? So again, the easy question is no, not always. But in this case, it really depends on the maturity level of your organization. Because sometimes this is where you start. So you are establishing especially your first work in progress limit. You may start with the team and people working in the team. But you can also look at different methods of establishing work in progress limits. So let's look at them, helping ourselves with the Kanban maturity model and maturity levels. So at maturity level 0, we establish personal work in progress limits. So if we have our individual Kanban system, we have our individual board with our individual limits, it means that it's just us and we think about ourselves. We are just trying to establish these WIP limits for ourselves. So whether 2 is good for me, or maybe 3, or maybe 1 and not more. Then when we start forming the teams at maturity level 1 transition, we are establishing per person work in progress limits. So this practice is, as it says here, is transition between maturity level 0, this individual level, towards maturity level 1 consolidation, which is the full team level, team focus level. So here we are just gathering a couple of people who by that moment had their individual work in progress limits, and we are using this information to establish the team board, which actually is not the full team board, it's more like aggregated individual Kanban boards with individual per person work in progress limits, but visualized in one place. And the evolution of it is at maturity level 1 consolidation, where you are establishing your team work in progress limits. So you are starting to navigate away from per person with limits. You are now talking about the team. So how much capacity we have within the team, or what we can do, how we can allocate this capacity to the phases of the work, to even saying, more visually to the columns on the board. And then at maturity level 3 transition, this is where we start talking about the whole services and delivering the whole service end to end, including upstream and downstream. And this is where we start establishing activity-based WIP limits. So we may imagine the situation that we have service Kanban board, which is for the whole service. And then there is even a couple of teams involved in delivering the service or building the product or doing the project. And then all together, you are establishing the work in progress limit for this service, which is activity-based. But if you decide to start with this practice and not having previous experience with establishing work in progress limits at lower maturity levels, you may see that that might be something that's not very intuitive, not very obvious to everyone, and you may find some difficulties in doing so. So if you start with establishing work in progress limits, start with these practices at maturity level 0 or 1, which are much easier to introduce than this practice from maturity level 3 transition. So these were the questions that you have sent to us. Thank you very much for them. Thank you to those who decided to share them with us. I hope that we answered properly and as you expected. Thank you very much. And now I see that there is something happening in the chat. So I will stop sharing and let me take a quick look in the chat.
Yes, Anya, we have one question already.
Okay.
As well, we encourage you to leave your questions in the chat. Or if you want, you can ask them to Anya online to take part in the discussion if you're okay to be recorded. If not, just drop the questions and we're going to pick them up on the way and answer to everything that you would like to know about.
All right, so I see the question from Alpesh, if I pronounce your name correctly, how to leverage use cumulative flow diagram. So maybe let me ask Alpesh, if you don't mind, could you please tell me whether you already use cumulative flow diagram or is it something that you consider and you would like to learn more?
Alpesh, you can drop the answer in the chat if you prefer, so we can understand the answer.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking, so it's my lunchtime.
No worries.
Bon
appetit.
The very important task. Really speaking, I've been using cumulative flow diagram, but have confusions about how it is being used and leveraged. I understand it gives me my flow from one stage to the another stage, and when the bands are of a different size, it gives some indication. But always have the challenge and confusion in understanding. So you could just elaborate in some simpler terms for me to understand. I would really appreciate it.
Okay. So we are teaching about cumulative flow diagram in Kanban system design class, which is pretty basic class. But what I found doing Kanban with different people is that cumulative flow diagram is one of the most tricky ones to implement, or even I would say maybe not tricky, but not intuitive. So what really helps people is to draw the cumulative flow diagrams by themselves, doing different, simulations like Get Kanban or FlowLab. So this is one thing that I realized, that cumulative flow diagram may not be that easy to read and to understand or to apply. So what we usually do with cumulative flow diagram is to look at the work that you have in progress and basically what happens with this work. So maybe one more thing to explain before I move on with CFD is that we have two big group of metrics, leading indicators and lagging indicators. So cumulative flow diagram is this leading indicator because it allows you to react immediately to what's going on in the process. Cumulative flow diagram in that sense is a very useful metric because you can observe cumulative flow diagram on the daily basis, and CFD tells you what's going on in your process and whether you basically have a problem in your process or not. And for example, if you are tracking something more than just open items and closed items, you are really tracking different activities within your process, then you can see whether there is any bottleneck appearing, or is there any place where items basically stack and start piling up. And you can immediately see it on the cumulative flow diagram because this line starts to, go away from each other. On the other hand, the situation which is not that common, but may also happen, is when you see these two lines of CFD almost meeting, it means that you've probably started your process, which means that you didn't provide enough demand to your process, and now you may find people sitting idle and having nothing to do with their time. And in the long term, the situation of starving the process may also lead to future problems of blockers where something will blow up. So this is the first observation of the lead time, of the cumulative flow diagram. Then if you look at it in more details, you can apply, you can use altogether cumulative flow diagram with Little's law. So you can keep observing whether your lead time is stable and whether you are pulling too many items to your process or not. So this is something that can be regulated with work in progress limits. And also cumulative flow diagram can give you the hints in the case that there is something wrong in your process in terms of the policies. So I gave you one example that because in the CFD, the lines go they are either flat or they are going up because it's cumulative. They cannot go down if it's done properly. So if you see these lines going down, it means that either item was moved back on the board or that it was removed from the process. So it was not closed in that sense that it was closed, done, and we can track the lead time of this item and the whole item end to end, but item disappeared from the process. So it was, for example, in development, and then you deleted this item completely. So then cumulative flow diagram will go crazy because there was item, it disappeared, it goes down. So it's not that often, I mean, it's not the first thing that you are using CFD for, but it can be an indicator of some problems in how you are dealing with your visualization and with your flow. Why I didn't use cumulative flow diagram as the first metric or the first visualization of some numbers, it was that when I looked at the cumulative flow diagram of teams that I worked with, it was, you know, like if you look at the Alps or any other mountains, up and down, up and down, up and down. So we said, okay, looking at CFD at this moment doesn't really make sense. It doesn't bring us any information. First, we need to clean up the process. We need to create the policies which will help us to make sure that the work is flowing. And then we can start using CFD. But there is one more anecdote which I like to use in the classes. So once upon a time, when I was young product owner, yes, I was also Scrum product owner, I had a team which really didn't like to start using Kanban. So they had very strong Scrum identity. They said, we are Scrum team, we don't want to even hear about Kanban. Okay, that's fine. Let's see what we can do about it. So we had all of our Scrum practices. We had Scrum Master who was, you know, really strict about how we should do work. And every single day after the daily meeting, we had this, you know, moment of barbecuing ourselves with a burn down chart. And it was, you know, every day there was a discussion. Oh my God, we are so hopeless. This burn down chart looks so ugly. It's not actually burning down. It's still going up. We need to stop working like this. And it took us a couple of months, I think somewhere around 3 to 4 months. And it was very exhausting to have this discussion every single day. And then once upon a time, I don't know, I decided to just take a look at cumulative flow diagram. It wasn't even done for purpose. I just did it because I looked at something else. And, you know, if you created a definition in Wikipedia, what is cumulative flow diagram, and you want like a perfect picture of cumulative flow diagram, you could make a screenshot of their process and their CFD. Their CFD looked like this. 2 lines, because it was only for in and out, but 2 lines going, you know, like this together beautifully, no ups and downs. So this team was very Kanban team in that sense that they really didn't respect any rules around how sprint should look. What they have done, they basically, when they finished an item, they pulled a new one. They finished an item, they pulled a new one. So they had a flow in their process, in their Scrum process. And I showed them this cumulative flow diagram. They were like, what is this? How we can use it? So we had this discussion about what CFD is, what it tells us. And they said, okay, we can look at it. We all felt much better about our process. So yeah, they still claimed that they are Scrum team, but we all stopped feeling so bad about our burn down charts. And actually we stopped using burn note charts at all.
Mm.
So Diana, before we move on, Alpesh, does it answer your question?
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. Okay, I really don't see more questions, so probably the participants of today's session may think more about what they would like to ask about. And meanwhile, if we already touched a question of you being a younger product owner, maybe we could raise a question about how Kanban is useful in product and project management.
Okay. So I was young product owner, now I'm old product manager. And you know that the product that we are responsible for is the Kanban maturity model and KMM Plus as a platform, which you can use to familiarize with this content. And yes, we are also using Kanban to build products from scratch. So not only to deliver after commitment, but also to build products. And in that sense, Kanban helps us to understand how to deal with options, because what we start with is not the work item type that we need to deliver, but is an option. So Kanban helps to deal with uncertainty around different things that we plan to build, but we are not really sure what they are about and whether they bring the value to our clients. Kanban also helps to deal with all of the information that we are gathering in the process of acquiring knowledge and discovering more information of the product that we are going to produce. So sometimes this is the product that is totally new, and actually our market doesn't even know that we are working on it. Sometimes this is the product that is requested by our clients, and then this process is a bit different, and also the metrics that we are collecting are a bit different. But still, Kanban can be used not only for this process from commitment point to delivery, but can also be used for this process from the moment when the item appears in the backlog to the moment when we really decide whether we want to do something or not. And I started to talk about real options. So this is one of the concepts that we apply. So if we have an item in our, we call it upstream Kanban, in our upstream Kanban, this item is an option, and option, as the name says, is optional. So you can either deliver it or you can discard it, or you can shelve it for later if you don't know whether you should do it or not. And in that sense, you can create a lot of options, because it means that you don't need to deliver all of them. You can have a process which will help you to understand which of these options bring the most value to everyone, to you and to your clients. And it also helps you to deal with uncertainty, because I remember the times when I was even not product owner, I was business analyst, and sometimes I received requests like, hey, could you please update this report for us? And this is the end of the requirements. So what report, what updates, why, what do you need it for, and who are your requester? What is your need? The whole process of gathering this information can also be managed using the Kanban method.
That's a good answer. Thank you, Anya. And meanwhile, I'm going to encourage our participants to leave their questions. Oh, we do have a question.
Yes, we do.
Dimitrios.
So Dimitrios, could you please share this follow-up question?
Yeah, sure. So I looked at what you presented and moving things backwards on the Kanban board, and you give us an example regarding going from development to the analysis, okay, which is a good example. And I definitely agree with you that in that case, you will lose knowledge. The example that we have feature teams that do development of new capability, and then they do testing of the new capability. Okay, so one part of the Kanban is development, another part of the Kanban is doing testing. So my question is, if the testing fails, okay, of that work item that they're doing with that capability, should they move it back? One option that I heard is you create a defect and put in development and keep the other one in front, but I like to keep it. What is your thought about this?
Yes, so I agree with this answer, and I will try to visualize why. So I have to, I have, can you see it? Oh, yes, you can see it right now, like this. No, you cannot. Never mind, you need to imagine that I have yellow sticky and pink sticky.
Yeah.
So what happens is that, let's imagine this is our physical board, not the virtual board. So we are in the testing of the item. As you said, we found a defect, we found a bug that needs to be corrected. First of all, what does it mean?
Can I clarify something?
Of course.
Okay, so the tester creates test cases, okay? Usually, maybe sometimes while the item is in development, and the time between something is ready for testing, the development happens, and being tested up, it's probably the next day, the next hour, something like that. Just I want to clarify that. That's how our process works. Okay, so go ahead, please.
Okay, I just wonder whether it affects my answer. I'm not sure yet. So maybe I will answer, then you will tell me whether it's fine or not. So we have this item which is being tested. We discovered a problem with it, and we need developers now to solve it for us because we are the testers. We don't know how to do it. So the practice, before the practice. So what does it mean from the process perspective and the flow perspective? I told you already that this is the process of discovering knowledge, and what we call these steps are dominant activities. And the word dominant is important here because if you are in testing, it means that the testing right now is dominant activity. But it doesn't mean that only testers can work on it. So it's not like testing silos. We are in the process of testing. We already discovered everything we could in the process of analysis and development. Now we are discovering knowledge about this item in the process of testing. And as the result of discovering this knowledge, we have discovered a defect. So this testing as our dominant activity stays the same. And for our yellow sticky, our main item, the dominant activity will be testing. And that's why item stays there. Now, what you described and what I agree with. We create a separate item, which is, for example, defect. And now it really depends on the process. We either put it in the backlog or we start working on it immediately. Of course, respecting work in progress limits. And this defect goes through either the same process or maybe defect may have different process, because sometimes defects require analysis, require development, correcting. Sometimes analysis is not needed, it just goes directly to developers. So it really depends on your process. So let's imagine it doesn't require analysis, it goes straight to the developers. So this red or pink sticky goes directly to developers. They are working on it, and now this defect is in dominant activity of development. Now it moves forward, and these two, pink and yellow, meet, and you are testing this functionality again. If the problem was solved, you are closing the defect, and you either test, you are doing further testing on the, or you are just moving on with this item. Why is it useful? Because in this particular case, you keep the track on what's going on, but also this defect is a separate work item type. This is something different than this original item, feature or user story. And for the separate work item type, you will realize that you have totally different lead time. So if you then look at the lead time of the feature, and you may see that this particular feature is an outlier, is in the tail of our lead time. It took longer than usually takes. You have immediately this defect, which was attached to this feature. And you know that out of, I don't know, 30 days of the lead time, it spent 5 days in the defect solving. And that's why the lead time was extended because of this defect. If you don't track it this way, you may lose this picture, because then you need to look through the whole history, looking at the transition, trying to figure out what happened. So this is one thing. Another one is that you just filter out all of the defects, and when defect appears in your process, you know the lead time for it, so you will know how long it's going to take. And Sven has something to add.
Yeah, I want to add something. Think about your item needs to be retested because of a bug or something else. If you just move the ticket backwards to reanalyze it or to development, you won't see that this ticket has a problem. The problem vanishes. It just looks like it's still in analyzing or it's still in development. You don't see that this item has much more knowledge in it than other items in this phase. So then, therefore, it's better not to move this ticket back to development and to fix it. So like Anna explained, having a separate defect tickets that expresses your problem better, and then you can think about of how many defect fixes do we have, and if this is a lot, then we need to change our development style or something else.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sven. Dimitrios, does it answer your question?
It does. It does not convince me yet. I mean,
Okay.
especially when you see software development, you have the test case and artifact. And
Mhm.
usually sometimes, all the test case will fail initially because there's nothing
Mhm.
soft over there. So I don't see the value of creating an artifact to trace that, to trace that. I think there's other ways to tracing that something failed, why it moved back. We use the workflow reason, maybe the testing failed. Okay. And also you can color annotate it, saying that's instead of a blue user story,
Okay.
make it a red user story. But I mean, we're also very sensitive of creating new defects. I mean, we're not going to hide them, but we want to, because this is under development yet. Okay, so we're still learning about this. We're still learning how the software will behave. So creating another artifact and managing it just for the purpose of, because the different class of service or different lead time, for much important is getting things done as quickly as possible in good quality. So, I mean, I'm not convinced that that's the right way to do that.
And if you do not have handoffs for development and testing, for instance, the developers are doing the tests so that you have very fast feedbacks, developing, testing, developing, testing, developing, testing, then you won't have two separated columns for development test. Maybe you have one column for development and test.
That's not the case that's not the case for most teams. We have we have developers, we have testers. There's no handoff. They work as a team together. Okay, there's not, I'll give you software in the 2 weeks, go and test it. It's testing, I tested it yesterday or today, I have a build process in place. You can test immediately. Okay, so it's.
So maybe you can consider to have just one column for testing and development so that you don't need to move it back. So it just stays in the same column.
Then everything is in
finished.
progress. Then everything is in progress. What's the value
maybe
of that?
if you have very fast feedback cycles, then maybe it's okay. So
okay,
actually, because now we are theoretizing a bit, not seeing your board, your process. So as Kanban says, be pragmatic. So be pragmatic. I usually say whatever works, it's worth checking. So if you decide to move items back, that's okay. If there are no consequences of that for you and for your process, maybe it's working for you. It's worth to have this potential consequences somewhere in the back of the head to think of them. But if you don't see them, then you don't need to force any practice if it's not applicable to you.
Okay, thank you so much, both of you. Yeah,
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, I think that we have time for one more question, if there is any.
I think that we have, maybe 5 more minutes. I don't see questions in the chat. If someone wants to ask his question or her question, can you please put in the chat? If not, Anya, I have a short question for you. Okay. And this is a very popular question because we really see the traction and people are really asking it. What is lead time and cycle time?
This is short question, but it's a tricky one. So, and even if you look at the slide that I have shared a couple of minutes ago, it said cycle time breakdown, not lead time breakdown. So I will use for the answer the Kanban maturity model. and what KMM says about it. So lead time is your time to market from the moment when you start to the moment when you deliver. So basically the definition is very simple. The problem with this definition is to know where is start and end in our process. And believe me, when I teach the teams, people working together, or I work with the teams working together, and I ask them, okay, so now everyone in the team, please tell me when your process starts. Sometimes in 8 people team, I can have 8 different answers. So people don't know where their process starts. So I wouldn't say that the lead time definition is a problem. The problem is in understanding of the process start and process end. But if we already know that, then anything what's between start and end will be our lead time. And we know that we have system lead time, so from the commitment to delivery to the first unbounded queue, basically in our process. We are also talking about the customer lead time, from commitment to the moment when customer accepts delivery, because after our deployment, there still may be some action which is on customer side. So you need to define the lead time for your processes, and this is one thing. The second question is about the cycle time. So cycle time is something internal. So if we look at our process, we have, let's use this example that we already used a couple of times. So we have analysis, development, testing. Then we are talking about the cycle time of analysis, the cycle time of development, the cycle time of testing. So the cycle times are within the bigger lead time. So that's the answer, according to the latest advice from the KMM. But I don't know the history of lead time versus cycle time. And I know that a lot of people uses them, exchangeably. So lead time or cycle time, the same. So when we just use cycle time and lead time, the first thing that I usually do, I start with making sure that we all understand these terms the same. And if we are on the same page, whatever we call it, it's good unless we understand each other, until we understand each other.
Okay, that sounds really great and very useful. As I told, a lot of people are looking for this information. Does anyone else has a questions about Kanban maturity model or Kanban method or the implementations they have? Maybe they are working with some other methods and trying to use Kanban and have some questions how to better do it. If you do, please tell us your question or write it in the chat.
Also, in the meantime, this is just the first session. Sorry, Diana, if I'm jumping into your shoes, but what we are planning to do, we'd like to really meet with you more often, not only me, but also other guests. So we hope that more specialists, experts from the Kanban field will join this Q&A sessions, so you can really learn more from the others. And so time to time, you will see emails coming from us asking for your questions, so we can find the best person to answer, or we'll just tell you who will be the guest, and then you can ask the questions to this particular person. But basically, this is what we plan to do. We would like to stay in touch with you, our KMM Plus users, to learn what is important to you, what information you are looking for, and just chat sometimes.
Yes, as well, apart from Q&A sessions, we plan to organize a lot of more interesting stuff, special webinars. We will also send you special offers or some unique special information. So we'd like to thank you to be our KMM Plus Insider. And in this way, you also have to know that we are trying to support you as much as we can with useful information on KMM Plus, and as well with additional sessions, Q&A sessions and materials, everything so that your agile initiatives and Kanban implementations are going smoothly and successfully. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us, to our emails. As well, stay tuned, subscribe to our newsletters where we share all the information. And YouTube channel, we are preparing a lot of new interesting things just in process.
They're coming.
Yes, they're coming,
Right.
and will be released soon. Yeah, I don't really see the questions. Do you think we can catch up with some other
Yes.
questions?
I mean, I think that we can wrap up. Thanks a lot, guys, for being with us in the evening in Europe. I'm not sure what time it is for you elsewhere in the world. So have a good evening or have a good day. And I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And as well, thank you for participating in the discussions, for your questions. Look forward to the recording. It's going to be released soon. Stay tuned to our newsletters and you will see it soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.